This craft starts out with some foam rollers from the Dollar Tree. And I decided to use these green foam rollers because they were just a little bit skinnier than the pink ones, but the pink ones would work great as well. And you're just going to shape them into a candy cane. For this first candy cane, I am going to use this rope from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to unwrap it. And we're just going to use one of those strands on that rope. Now let's go ahead and take one of those strands and a little bit of hot glue, and I'm going to wrap that around our candy cane. I'm going to continue doing that, and every inch or so I'll add a little bit more hot glue and continue to wrap. This next step is completely optional, but I like to take a lighter and I just burn any of that extra frizz off of our rope. Now let's give this candy cane some stripes. I'm going to use some of these berry garlands, and I'm starting out with some red berry garland. And I did get this at the Dollar Tree, but sometimes if you can't find it there, I have seen it at Hobby Lobby. I found it on Amazon as well. So it kind of is hit or miss of whether or not you'll be able to find that. And now I just took a little bit of hot glue at the bottom of that candy cane, and I'm just going to wrap some of those berries all the way around my candy cane. Now let's go ahead and repeat that step with some white berry garland. And now our adorable candy cane is complete. I just love how this turns out. It's such a rustic piece you can hang on a tree or put on a tiered tray. Now for our next candy cane, we're going to start out with that same foam roller. And this time I'm going to be using some of that thick, chunky yarn for my white. And then I'm going to use a thinner yarn for my red. We'll start out with that white chunky yarn, and using some hot glue at the bottom there, we're just going to attach that yarn and then wrap that all the way up our candy cane. And now that we have our candy cane all wrapped up, I am wanting to cover those little plastic caps on the roller, so I'm just going to cut 2 little pieces of yarn and take some hot glue and cover those up. Now let's grab our red yarn, and I believe I got this yarn at Ben Franklin, and I'm just going to cut a piece about a yard in length. And I'm going to take that piece, and then one of the ends I'm going to just kind of stuff and hide in that white yarn, and I'm going to hot glue that into place. Now all we have to do is wrap that red yarn all the way around our candy cane. And periodically I will add a little bit of hot glue once I'm satisfied with my placement of the yarn. And now our fluffy candy cane is ready to hang. This is perfect for a tree, but could also be used on a tiered tray. Now for our third candy cane, I am going to be using this checkered ribbon that I found at Hobby Lobby, and I got this on the 50% off. Now I'm going to just take this ribbon and I'm going to unwrap it a little bit, and I think I unwrapped about 2.5 yards. I probably should have measured it, but I found that it was easier to wrap this around the candy cane when it wasn't on the spool of ribbon. I'm just taking some hot glue, and I actually hot glued this right to the bottom of the roller there so that I could cover those little white caps, and I just started wrapping that ribbon all the way around our candy cane. Now we could just leave our little candy cane like this, but I wanted to add a little bow, so I just used a little bit of hot glue and added a twine finger bow to the top. And now this candy cane is complete, and I just love the rustic feel to this candy cane. It is so pretty. Now I would love to hear from you guys. Which one of these candy canes do you like best? Do you like number 1, number 2, or number 3? Please drop a note in the comments below. Grab yourself one of these cute nutcrackers from the Dollar Tree and let's make a gingerbread man. So for our first step, we're going to remove the hair from our nutcracker. And to do this, I was able to pull most of the hair off without much trouble. Originally, I was going to keep the hair and add it back on after I painted everything, but then I decided that I liked the look without the hair. So this is something you could consider if you wanted to keep the hair and add it back on later. Now, once we have all of the hair removed from our nutcracker, he is ready to take outside to paint. For this step, I'm going to be using Warm Caramel by Rust-Oleum. And I'm going to take this outside and I'm going to paint some light coats of spray paint over the top of this piece. Now, it did take about 2 or 3 coats because I did a nice light coat over each spot, just to make sure that everything adhered nicely. Once everything has dried completely, I'm going to bring our nutcracker back in, and using some puffy paint, we're going to decorate our nutcracker. Now, some ideas that I had for something like this is if you prepped a bunch of these nutcrackers ahead of time, this would be a fun craft where you could have everything painted with the gingerbread coloring, and you can set up a whole bunch of puffy paints and decorations and have your kids decorate each nutcracker however you'd like, or you could have a fun little craft party where you're able to do the same. Now, once you're done decorating your nutcracker, your gingerbread man just needs a little time to dry, and then he'll be ready to display. I just love how this turned out. I think this is going to be so great to put with all my new gingerbread decor. So here's a quick and easy ornament that you can make for those dog lovers in your life. So we're going to start out with these little wood bone cutouts, and I got these on Amazon, and I'll leave a link for them in my description box below. But I'm just taping these down onto a paintable surface, and I'm going to take my nutmeg brown from Apple Barrel, and we're going to go ahead and just paint both sides of these little wood cutouts. To get the color brown that I wanted, I did have to do 3 coats of paint on either side, just because I wanted that nice, rich gingerbread look. Now, while our paint is drying, I'm going to go over to my Cricut, and I'm going to cut out the name of my 2 dogs, Luna and Mocha. Now, if you don't have a Cricut, you can do this with stickers, or if you have good handwriting, a paint pen would work just fine as well. Now, all I'm going to do is take that little cutout, and I'm going to add that to the center of my bone. So now that we have both of our little dog names on our bones, I am going to take these little bales that I got on Amazon, and I'm going to flip these little dog bones over, and these kind of look like they're hanging from a tag, and I really like the way that these bales look on the back of these little bones. To attach them, I'm using E6000, and we're just going to set the bale right on top. And these are typically used for jewelry making, but I love using these for ornaments. Now, once you have these bales added to the back of these little bones and they've dried, it usually takes about a half an hour or so. We'll go ahead and flip them back over, and now let's decorate them to make them look like little gingerbread bones. And to decorate them, I am going to be using puffy paint for this, but if you don't have puffy paint, a paint pen would work just fine. Or if you have a steady hand, you could just use paint with a paintbrush and get that frosted snow look onto your gingerbread. Now, that puffy paint did take overnight to dry, but once everything was dried, I did take this ribbon that I had in my stash, and I'm going to go ahead and just make some nice little hangers for our bones. And now our adorable little ornaments are ready to hang or to gift. I just love how these turned out. I think these are so adorable and such a fun little ornament to make. And these are kid-friendly and senior-friendly alike. Let me know what you think about these ornaments down in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this content, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Thank you. So this is a fun and simple craft that you can do with one of the large candy cane forms from the Dollar Tree and a small package of lights, 2 rolls of decorative mesh, and some zip ties. So I'm going to start out by laying out my candy cane form, and then I'm going to flip it over to the back side. And once I have that flipped over, I'm going to take that strand of lights, and these lights I did get at Walmart. This is just 20 lights in the strand. And I'm just going to start zip tying the lights from the bottom up and around the candy cane. And I wanted the plug to be at the bottom of my candy cane so it'll be easier to plug in. And one thing I found when making these is that it was nice to zip tie it from the bottom and then zip tie the top and then add the zip ties in between just to kind of space things out a little bit better with the lights. And now that we got our lights all in place, we just go ahead and clip any of those extra little pieces off of the zip ties. Now grab your white decorative mesh, and we're going to go ahead and start at the bottom of the candy cane and just start wrapping that around the whole entire candy cane. And we're going to use the whole entire roll of decorative mesh just so it's nice and thick underneath. When you get to the end of the hook of the candy cane, I just go ahead and I wrap that white mesh up and around and just kind of make sure everything's tucked all nice and tight inside of that candy cane. And then I'm just going to take that roll and just continue wrapping it until I get to the end of the roll. And once I get to the end of the roll, I am going to zip tie that to the back of the candy cane. And once that is secure, I just go ahead and trim that little piece of the zip tie off and any excess decorative mesh. Now here is what your candy cane should look like. Next, I'm going to grab my red decorative mesh and I'm going to take it, and while it's still on the roll, I'm folding it in half so it'll be a thinner stripe being able to go up and around the candy cane. And then starting at the bottom of the candy cane, I'm going to wrap it around the bottom 2 or 3 times just to make sure it's nice and tight around that bottom piece of the candy cane. And then at an angle, I'm going to take that stripe and just wrap it up and around the candy cane. Now, one of these rolls of decorative mesh will make 2 candy canes, so you might want to make a pair of them to put out in your yard. And as you can see while I'm wrapping this candy cane, it's pretty easy to just kind of fold that decorative mesh in half and just continue wrapping. And the more you wrap, the more it just kind of stays into place. When you get to the end of the hook, I flip the candy cane over and I trim the excess mesh and pinch it together. Next, I'll grab a zip tie and just zip tie this to the back side. And once you're satisfied, you can flip this candy cane over and see what you've created. I just love how this turns out. I'm going to show you lit up here what it looks like. And you can tell that when I dim the lights, it really shows bright through here. Now I decided to keep my candy canes plain like this, but you could add a bow to it. Now here is what it looks like outside. I just love how this spruces up the outdoor area for decorating, and it's a fun craft and easy one to do. Get crafty with Lady Red's monthly newsletter, tips behind the scenes and exclusive giveaways. And if you subscribe today, you'll get a checklist for your next craft party. Check out the link in the description box below. So I absolutely love these wood frames, and I get them from Walmart, and they're such a great blank to use for different crafts. So I'm going to start out by removing the back side of this frame here, and this is the insert inside of it, and I'm going to go ahead and take the outside of this frame and set that aside for a few minutes. We're going to start by taking that first insert of the frame, and I'm going to paint that with some chalkboard paint from Folk Art. And I am going to do 2 coats of the chalkboard paint just to make sure I have a nice thick coat on there. Now, while that is drying, I am going to go back to the frame that we set aside earlier, and I'm going to place this down onto a paintable surface. And using my nutmeg brown from Apple Barrel, I'm going to coat this frame a few times, probably 3 coats across the front and the back side of this frame. Now, going back to our frame insert, I have this silk screen that I found on Amazon last year, and I haven't had a chance to use it yet, so I'm really excited to use it. And this says baking through the snow. And we're just going to place that right on the center of our piece. Next, I'm going to grab my chalk paste and vintage lace and my squeegee, and I'm going to go ahead and squeegee that chalk paste over the top of our silk screen. And if you haven't used a silk screen stencil before, these are great. They're self-adhesive, and then when you're done using them, you're able to wash them in warm soapy water and reuse them again over and over again. And once you are done adding that chalk paste, you just peel this little stencil right off, and it makes this most beautiful little piece. Now, while that dries, let's go back to our frame. Now that the frame has completely dried, I'm going to go ahead and grab my Apple Barrel white paint pen. Next, I'm going to just take that pen and start drawing some different designs to make it look very festive and fun for a gingerbread frame. So now that we've added some gingerbread touches to our frame, let's go ahead and add back in our center piece to the frame. And once we have that secured into place, we'll go ahead and flip over our frame, and let's add some final touches. So I found these adorable little peppermint candies, and they're fake candies on Amazon. So I went ahead and I'm going to add a few of these to our frame. I'm going to hot glue them into each corner of the frame to give it a little extra sweetness. Next, I'm going to take this little wood spoon that I had gotten from Hobby Lobby, and I'm just going to hot glue that right to the corner of our frame for the final touch. And wow, I just love how this piece turns out. This is such a fun and easy piece that you can make for the Christmas season. And I feel like this is definitely something you could do for a Christmas crafting party, and everybody could decorate the frame however they like to take home. I'm going to start out with some air dry clay, and this clay I got on Amazon quite a while ago, so it is not as fresh as I would have liked, but it did work for this craft. I'm going to take this out and I'm going to roll it out about 1/4 of an inch thick. Then I'm going to take this metal cookie cutter and cut out some little gingerbread men. And once I have a few of these guys cut out, I'm going to lay them out on a little tray and let them dry. It did take me about 48 hours for these to dry completely. Now, once these little gingerbread men have dried, I am going to go ahead and grab my Apple Barrel Nutmeg Brown, and I'm going to paint these with a few coats of paint. Now, the first coat of paint is definitely very light and more like a primer on these. I ended up having to do like 4 coats to get the color that I wanted. So for this craft, I wanted to show you the differences in using different kinds of paint for gingerbread crafts. So the first little ornament we're going to make is using some puffy paint. And this is very simple. All we're doing here is adding that puffy paint to give our little gingerbread a face and add a little frosting decor. So for this next one, we're going to be using spackling and paint. This is a little bit more involved, but it looks really cool when you're done. You're going to be taking the spackling, and I just spooned a little bit of it into a bowl. Once you have a little bit in there, I'm going to add some paint. And so for this, since I want the spackle to be white, I'm going to be using some white acrylic paint from Apple Barrel. And then you're just going to mix that up. And then once you're satisfied with the color, I'm going to go ahead and pipe this onto our little gingerbread. Now for the eyes and the little buttons, I'm going to be using a number 2 from Wilton. And then for the decorative frosting on the arms and the legs, I am using a number 18. I feel like this look gives a more meringue or buttercream frosting look to your gingerbread cookie. Our third technique is stenciling. So I'm taking a stencil here, and this is one of the silkscreen stencils, and I'm just going to lay that over the top of my little gingerbread man. And then using some chalk paste, I'm just going to go ahead and squeegee that over the top. And then we'll remove the silk screen. And that is all there is to it. It's so simple to do. So now that all of our gingerbread men are dry, I'm going to flip them over. What I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be adding a hanger so that we'll be able to make these into cute little ornaments. To do this, I'm using these bales, and I did get these on Amazon. I believe they're a jewelry making thing, but I have been using these for ornaments, and I really love how they look. So to attach, I'm going to be using some E6000, and then we'll just go ahead and set that bale right on top of each one of these gingerbread men. And once everything is dry, we'll go ahead and flip these over. And then we're going to add a little ribbon to make a hanger. And now our 3 little gingerbread men are ready to hang on your tree. I just love how these turned out. They have such a different look, but are all gingerbread. Which one's your favorite? Number 1, number 2, or number 3? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this content, please consider hitting that like or subscribe button below. Thank you! So for this craft, we're going to be taking some ornament pieces that I found at the Dollar Tree and some that I made with some air dry clay. One piece that I got from my dear friend Robin over at Crafts Unleashed that she got over at Dollar General. I don't have any Dollar Generals near me. She sent me some pieces for me to craft with. So thank you, Robin. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to prep some of these little ornaments. And since I'm not going to be using them as ornaments, I did come back in with some spackle. And on these snowflakes and on the Christmas trees, I went ahead and I just filled in the holes at the top so that we can cover that up. So once I had all of these wood ornaments prepped, I did come in with my Apple Barrel Nutmeg Brown, and I painted a coat of paint over the tops of all of these ornaments. Now, you don't need to paint both sides because we're only going to be using one side of this ornament, so that did make this go a little bit quicker, but I did do 3 or 4 coats per ornament. Now for the little wood house here, I did have to prep that front of that house a little bit by adding a little wet towel and removing some of that paper on the front, just so it was easier for me to go ahead and paint my coat of that nutmeg brown over the top of this house. And for my last 2 houses, these ones were plastic, and I thought that this might be better to do a spray paint on. So I did use my Rust-Oleum paint here, and I went ahead and took these outside and I spray painted them. And these little ornaments do pop out. I didn't show that on camera, but you can take the back off and then you can put that back on later. So now that we have all of our pieces prepped, I took my little puffy paint and we're going to decorate all of our pieces. So I started out decorating my 3 little gingerbread men, and now I'm going to decorate my 3 Christmas trees. Once we have our trees complete, we do our 3 little snowflakes. Then it's time to decorate our 3 little houses. And since each one of these houses are just a little bit different, each one of them got their own individual style. And I'm just using the puffy paint to do all of this. Then, once we get these adorable houses all complete, we're going to go ahead and set these all aside overnight to dry. So the next morning, I went ahead and I took one of these wreaths, and I got this at Walmart, and I think it was like $5. And I'm taking it outside, and I just kind of sprayed it down with a little bit of white spray paint to make it look like snow. Now let's go ahead and build our wreath. The first thing I'm going to do is take all of my gingerbread pieces and place them on top of the wreath until I am satisfied with the placement of all of them. Next, I went ahead and I added some of these fun red berries that I got at the Dollar Tree to the wreath to give it a little pop of color. Then I also added some of the little white berries just to give it more of a candy cane look. I thought I was going to add those little candies that I had from Amazon, but it just didn't feel right when I put them on the wreath, so we decided to not use them. Once I am satisfied, I'm going to come back in with some hot glue, and I'm going to hot glue all of our pieces into place. And once we have all of our pieces hot glued to our wreath, I'm going to go ahead and make a bow. The ribbon I'm going to be using for the bow, I did get at Hobby Lobby last year, and I really love the vintage vibe this has. So I'm just going to cut a strip of this ribbon, and then taking some hot glue, I'm going to make a loop. And what I did here is I made 3 loops, a smaller one, a medium size, and a larger loop. Once you have all of your loops, we are then going to cut a strip of the ribbon to make our tails. Now we're going to take all 4 of these pieces and make the base of our bow. What I found works well is I just stack these loops on top of my tails. So I just go ahead and I stack them a little bit off-centered on top of the tail. And then once I have them into place, I'm going to take a pipe cleaner and I'm going to put that around the center. And I'm just going to squish everything together. And then I'll twist that pipe cleaner around onto the back side of this ribbon. And then we flip the bow over, and holding it in the center, I just fluff everything out. Once I'm satisfied with the fluffing on the bow, I did cut another small piece of this ribbon, and then I'm folding it into thirds. Once I've done that, I'm going to put that around the center of the bow just to make it look nice and polished. We'll go ahead and hot glue it on the back side. And if your piece is a little bit too big, just go ahead and trim any of the excess ribbon off before you hot glue the last piece into place. Now, once your bow is secure in the center there, we're going to flip our bow over, and using some scissors, we're going to dovetail the ends of our bow. Now, if you don't want to dovetail them, an angle cut is also a nice way to finish the bow off. To attach our bow to our wreath, I did take a piece of the ribbon and I tied a nice loop around the wreath so that way I had a hanger. I then took the bow that I made, and using that pipe cleaner that I left on the back side of that bow, I'm going to twist that around the loop of the ribbon that is going to be the hanger for our wreath. Now, once we have our bow attached, our wreath is complete and ready to hang. I just love how this gingerbread wreath turns out. I think this is so adorable and such a fun piece to make. Browsing through the Dollar Tree, I found this adorable little birdhouse in the Crafter Square section, and we're going to transform it into a gingerbread masterpiece. I'm starting out with my apple barrel nutmeg brown paint, and I'm going to completely coat the whole exterior of this birdhouse with the paint. And while creating all of these fun gingerbread pieces, I have noticed that I do have to do multiple coats of this paint to get the color that I want. And once you're satisfied with your paint, I'm going to go ahead and grab a white painter's pen. And this one is from Apple Barrel, and I got that at Walmart, I think. But I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to start drawing a cute little frosting edge on my little house. And then I continue drawing all over the outside perimeter of the house. For the roof and the base, we are going to be doing something different. So once you're satisfied with how your house is starting to look, we are going to go ahead and let this dry for a few minutes. And then I grabbed my puffy paint. And what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be adding that puffy paint to the whole entire roof of this house. And to do this, I kind of spread a little bit of the puffy paint out, and then I came in with a paintbrush so that way I could make little swirls in the puffy paint to make it look more like falling snow on an actual roof. And to give the look of the snow kind of falling off the roof a little bit, I did come back in with that puffy paint and I just spread it around with the brush until I was satisfied with how the roof was looking. And then after we do that, we're going to take that puffy paint and we're going to kind of do the same thing around the perimeter of the house to make it look like there's snow covered around the house. And then I do come in with that paintbrush just to give a little bit of a swirl and smooth out the puffy paint around the perimeter. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab some glitter, and this is just white glitter that I had gotten from the Dollar Tree a few years back. And I'm just going to take that glitter and I'm going to put a little bit of it in my hand, and I'm going to sprinkle that very lightly over the top of the house and around the base of the house. This is while that puffy paint is still wet. So this will give it a really nice, fun snow-like texture. Now pack your patience because that puffy paint is going to take overnight to dry. Now once that is completely dry, I am going to take this little wreath that I had from a previous craft, and I'm just going to be hot gluing that around the center of the hole for our little birdhouse. And now once our wreath is in place, I am going to take this adorable little red bird and I'm going to hot glue it right inside the wreath. And I did find these birds on Amazon based on a recommendation from Brenda from one of her videos. So thank you, Brenda, for recommending these cute little birds. And if you're interested in these birds, I will put a link for them down in my description box below. And now this adorable gingerbread birdhouse is complete. I just love how this turned out. This turned out way better than I thought it was going to, and I'm very happy with how this looks. Let me know what you guys think about it in the comments below. And do you like the sparkles in the snow, or do you like it without sparkles? Now let's make a trio of ornaments. I found these adorable ornaments at the Dollar Tree, and 3 of them didn't match my decor, so we are going to remake them. First thing I'm going to do is just remove all the bows and the hangers that came with these ornaments, and we'll save those for another craft. Next, to remove everything off of these ornaments, I just spritz them with a little bit of water, add a paper towel over the top so everything soaks in. And then I'm going to just go ahead and take a scraping tool here and just scrape all of the excess off. I did take my heat tool and made sure that the ornament was nice and dry before I sanded anything extra off of the front. And once I'm satisfied with my removal of everything on the front of these, I'm going to go ahead and get started making them over. Now for the first two ornaments, they're going to be very similar. I'm using a napkin that I found at HomeGoods, which is a great place to find adorable napkins at. And I like this one because of the foil inlay on one of the quadrants here. So I'm actually going to go ahead and remove the back two layers of this napkin. And we're going to use that foil piece for our ornament. Now going back to our ornament, I'm going to tape that down to a paintable surface, and using my Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster, we're going to do a nice coat of paint over the top of the front of the ornament. And once that paint has completely dried, I am going to use my hard coat Mod Podge here, and I'm just going to go ahead and paint a nice coat of the Mod Podge over the top of the ornament. And once that is completely dry, I'm going to go back to that napkin we prepped earlier and lay that over the top of our ornament. And once I'm satisfied with the position of the napkin, I'm going to take a piece of parchment paper and layer that over the top of the napkin. And then we'll grab our iron and iron that napkin right on top of the ornament. And before we do anything else, I am going to grab my Mod Podge and just do a quick coat over the top of the ornament. And this will allow the napkin to seal in. And once that is completely dry, I am going to grab my zip sander and I'm going to sand around the outside edge of the ornament in a downward motion. Next, I'm going to take my ornament and flipping it over and putting it on a paintable surface. I am going to take my flamenco red from Apple Barrel and I'm going to paint the back side of this ornament. Then I decided to paint the perimeter of the ornament as well with the same red paint. Now, this worked out pretty well having this taped down to a piece of cardboard, but it did get a little bit of that red on the front side of our ornament, which at first I thought was not going to be good, but it turned out to look amazing. Now, once everything is dry, here is what the front side of our ornament looks like. I am going to just take my little weeding tool from Cricut, and I'm just going to poke the hole back through so I can put this ribbon through to make a hanger. And for our final touch, I am going to add a little bow to the top of the ornament. And I started out with a sheer bow, and then I added a gold bow over the top of it. And that's all there is to it. This first little ornament is complete. I just love how it turns out. Now for our second ornament, when I did the red around the perimeter, it did not look as pretty as it did on that first one. So what I did was I took a little baby wipe and I'm just going to wipe the excess paint off of it. And the paint was still wet, so it came off very easily. And now once everything was dry, I went ahead and I returned the ornament to our piece of cardboard. And I grabbed my Delta Creative gold metallic paint. And I'm going to take a dry brush here and I'm just going to dry brush around the outside of the ornament. Then I grabbed my Cricut tool and I went ahead and I just poked the hole back in so I could string my ribbon through to make a hanger. And once we have a hanger on this adorable ornament, I am going to add a double gold bow and this ornament will be complete. So it looks a lot like that first one, but just with a little bit more gold in it. And it still has that red on the back to make sure that the ornament is finished on both sides. Now moving on to ornament number 3. So for this ornament, I wanted to bring the candy cane into it. So I'm using this DIY set from the Dollar Tree and I'm going to pull out that candy cane from it. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take some clippers and I'm going to clip the little tabs off the top of the candy canes. And using my zip sander, I'll just sand over the top just to make sure everything is nice and rounded. Next, I'm going to tape this down to a paintable surface, and using my Waverly chalk paint in the color white, I'm going to give a nice coat of paint over the top of these candy canes. I only did one coat of paint on these candy canes because I still wanted to see the lines on the candy canes through the paint. And using my Mod Podge, I'm going to take a thin brush here and I'm just going to go ahead and paint a little bit of Mod Podge on every other stripe on the candy cane. And while that Mod Podge is still wet, I am going to grab out some red sparkle glitter. And I'm just going to put a piece of paper underneath my candy cane here so that way any of the excess glitter will fall onto that. And I'm just going to sprinkle that over the top of the candy cane, and then you'll see the beautiful stripes starting to show through. And then we just keep repeating the same step on the next candy cane until all of the red has been added to our candy cane. Once you ensure that everything is really nice and dry, we're going to repeat the same steps, but this time we're going to be doing white glitter instead of the red. So we'll put the Mod Podge in between the different stripes and then add our white glitter. And once you're satisfied with the white glitter, we'll go ahead and clean up our mess and then ensure that everything is nice and dry before we seal everything in. And once we know that everything is dry, I am going to take that same Mod Podge and I'm going to do a coat over the top, and I'm going to let this sit for about a half an hour. So I like to add different textures and things into my crafts. So I found this adorable gold placemat at the Dollar Tree, and I'm taking a small piece from it and I'm going to trace on the back side of it the ornament. Next, I just grab a pair of scissors and I just trim the ornament out. And this is really easy to cut, so don't worry about it. It cuts very nicely with scissors. Now, going back to our candy cane, I am going to add a few little embellishments to the candy cane. We are going to take a few pieces of greenery and I'm just going to hot glue them to the center where that bow used to be. And then over the top of that greenery, I'm going to add a little black bow. And now we're just going to put everything together. And some of this stuff I didn't get on camera and I don't know how that happened, but I did paint the back side of this ornament red and I glued the placemat onto the front of the ornament. And for this one, I wanted to use a black ribbon, so to feed that through to make a hanger out of it, I had to use my Cricut tool there to get it to go through. Now, once we have our hanger made, we can go ahead and add that candy cane to the center. And to glue that candy cane on, I did use my Type Bond Quick and Thick with a little bit of hot glue. And now this adorable candy cane ornament is complete. And I think this goes with our other two ornaments amazing. I just love how all three of these ornaments turned out. And this is such a fun trio set with a little bit of a difference between the three.